Good morning, everyone. Welcome this morning. We're going to start with 529 in our hymnal, Oh How I Love Jesus, and I'll invite you to join me in standing as we sing the first three verses right now. Let's have a word of prayer this morning as we open. Lord, we're thankful to be able to gather together in your sanctuary this morning. We're thankful for the word you've given us and how it tells of your love for us. We ask that as we study it this morning, that we will learn to love you in return and act like we love you. And just in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. You may be seated, except kindergarten, 4 and 5, first grade class. Good. Al, your class.
Psalm 119:66. Teach me good judgment and knowledge, for I believe in your commandments. Psalm 119:66.
Good. 4th, 5th, and 6th. Good. The girls of the youth group.
John 14, 16, and 17. And I will ask the Father, and he will give you another helper to be with you forever, even the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive, because it neither sees him nor knows him. You know him, for he dwells with you and will be in you. John 14, 16, and 17.
Good. It's a good thing the boys have an excuse because they're greeting the adult class. good. I'll invite the other classes to join you in standing, and we'll be dismissed on the fourth verse of Oh How I Love Jesus. You may be seated.
Good morning, everyone. Does anybody need a handout from last week? Hey, Zach, will you help hand these out? I was looking for volunteers. You raised your hand. Does anybody need a verse card? Oh, excellent. Paul and Angie. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to call you out. I forgot I was on a mic. Oh. Well, today we're going to be in Daniel 7. I was not near as excited to teach this lesson as I was Daniel 6. And it was because the more I read it, the more overwhelmed I got with what I thought I needed to understand about it in order to teach it. There's all these details about the revived Roman Empire and the 10 horns and the little horn, and there's references that are paralleled in Revelation and understanding what that means and making sure that I'm not steering people the wrong way. It just kind of became overwhelming. But I kept thinking back as a pastor was going through the book of Revelation a few years ago. I really liked how he constantly would bring it back to what was the author's intent to the audience that he was writing to at the time. So as I started thinking about that from that perspective, what was Daniel trying to convey to his audience at that time? It made it much easier to focus on what's pertinent out of this chapter. Now, last week I asked you guys a question. What is the overarching theme of the book of Daniel? Yeah, the sovereignty of God. The sovereignty of God and particularly over mankind and our empires and this world and our government structures and everything that happens. And I told you all the little saying my dad had always kind of said, and it kind of helped me as you're thinking about life as, men are evil, but God is sovereign. And we see this played out constantly throughout this book. Are you all fearful of the days in which we live right now? Okay. Now, this isn't a quiz on your reliance on the sovereignty of God. When you hear the news, when you see what's going on, regardless whether you should feel confident, do you feel fearful? I know that's my first instinct. I literally got off Facebook. I got sick of the stuff people were posting, the little clips of the news that were steered wrong. I try not to watch the news. I listen to Albert Mohler on the briefing, and I get the stuff that I think I need is pertinent. But for the most part, I try not to, because it just makes, fearful is probably not the right word, angry is much more. And I get angry at the people that I should love. I mean, that was the main reason I got off Facebook, because the people that I thought were my friends, the things that they were posting, it just made me angry. And I'm like, if people really think like this, we're doomed. Well, you know what? They do think like that. Yes, they're doomed. So let's look at 2 Timothy 3:1. Second Timothy 3:1, Paul says, "But understand that in the last days there will come times of difficulty." It's not new for us right now to be looking at what's happening and being worried. Paul's been warning about that since the first century. This book right here this chapter is kind of to help Daniel understand in the bigger perspective of the times he's going through right now. Now, chapters 1 through 6 in the book of Daniel are historical narrative. They tell us who Daniel is. We learn of Daniel's character. We learn of the reigning empires in Babylon at the time, the Babylonian Empire and the Medo-Persians. We learn about the rulers. We learn about the people of Israel in that time. But it's all historic narrative. That's why I was excited to teach on chapter 6. I enjoy historic narrative. I really like world history, especially in that time period. Chapters 7 through 12, though, are all prophetic. These are all prophetic books. We could see in the historical narrative it played out how God was in control, right? We've seen that all the way back from the first chapter when Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to eat the food offered to idols, but yet they still flourished. But we see that all the way through. We saw that play out. The prophetic books now are going to show overarching in history, not just that slice in time, but God's not just sovereign to Daniel's audience. God's not just sovereign in what we're going through right now, but in what is going to happen throughout the folds of history. Let's go to chapter 7 in Daniel, verse 1. We're just going to look at the first little phrase there. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions. Now, interestingly enough, that little phrase right there, that snippet into when did this take place, really helped me kind of understand how this chapter, this vision fit in to Daniel and to Daniel's audience. Now, chapter 7 is actually taking place somewhere between chapters 4 and 5. This is after Nebuchadnezzar's humbling, but this is before Belshazzar's humbling, I guess, in chapter 5. This is the first year of Belshazzar. Now, to kind of explain the background of why that's important, we don't know exactly what year chapter 4 took place as far as when Nebuchadnezzar's humbling took place, but he reigned as king even after he was humbled. He died, and then his son, evil Marduk, who would name your son that? I don't know. Became king. And there's some controversy to that. He wasn't the oldest son. His father Nebuchadnezzar and him had some disputes. There's actually one recorded thing where they had disputes over religious things, and evil Marduk ended up in prison over it. But for somehow he became king right after Nebuchadnezzar. There's not a lot of historical data that they can find of why, but he became king. Well, interestingly, one of the very first things that he did, let's go to 2 Kings 25. Look at verse 27. 2 Kings 25:27. And in the 37th year of the exile of Jehoiachin, I know there's a kin and a chin, or are they both kin, Pastor? I know they're different people, but am I pronouncing it right, or it doesn't matter? Chin, okay. King of Judah, in the 12th month, on the 27th day of the month, evil Marduk, king of Babylon, in the year that he began to reign, graciously freed Jehoiachin, king of Judah, from prison. And he spoke kindly to him and gave him a seat above the seats of the kings who were with him in Babylon. So Jehoiachin put off his prison garments, and every day of his life he dined regularly at the king's table, and for his allowance, a regular allowance was given him by the king according to his daily needs as long as he lived. So let's look at this from Daniel's perspective. Daniel is very much longing for the exile to end, right? This was devastating. Jerusalem sacked. Judah is taken to Babylon. They've been there. All of a sudden, Nebuchadnezzar has a change of heart, a divine given change of heart, and he becomes a new man. And then the turmoil of the king dying and a new king coming in. Think of the relief when all of a sudden this new king, right shortly after he takes reign, frees someone from the line of David, takes him out of prison. Think of the sign that would kind of give. Wouldn't that give hope? Like, oh, okay. God is working. Things might be okay. Well, he only reigned for 2 years, evil Marduk, and then he was murdered by one of his brother-in-laws, who we don't know a whole lot about, but again, from Daniel in the Judeans' perspective, this is kind of a turmoil. It looked like we were heading in the right direction. All of a sudden, now there's somebody new. They murdered who we had hope in. He reigned for 4 years, and then his son became king, and that didn't even last a month. Because soon as he became king, this guy named Belshazzar, who was a military general, he started a coup and murdered him, and then gave the kingship to his dad, Nabonidus. Belshazzar basically was the ruler in charge of the Babylonian capital city, that's what we see in the book of Daniel, him there the whole time. So right now, this has just happened because Daniel says he has this vision in the first year of Belshazzar. This coup has just happened. Belshazzar, who is also a grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, his dad was also married to one of Nebuchadnezzar's daughters. But there's this uproar, and it doesn't seem like things are going to go in the favor of the Israelites. And we see later in a book of Daniel praying to God, when is this? It's the 70 years. I mean, for your name's sake, are you going to restore us? I mean, so you could see this in his heart. He was ready for this exile to end, but so much is happening right now in this first year of Belshazzar. So he has this vision right during that time. So kind of keep all of that backstory in mind as we're reading through this vision that he has. Also, this is about 14 years before the feast of Belshazzar, before the writing on the wall. We're going to read verses 1 through 3. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in his bed. Then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and 4 great beasts come up out of the sea, different from one another. What insight might these visions of nations as beasts give us into God's view of nations today? Before we get even into the description of these beasts, just this first little thing that Daniel saw. He saw a sea, he saw wind coming from the 4 corners, and these beasts coming out. What insight does that kind of give you into God's view of nations today? Okay, changing like the wind. So, when I see this, I saw in my vision by night, behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and four great beasts came out of the sea. So the sea is it's humanity. And the wind coming from the four corners of the earth, it's God stirring up this sea, and then the beasts come forth from it. God is in control of that. These beasts didn't make themselves, right? They were stirred up by God. He is in control of this whole thing. Verse 4, we're going to look at the first beast. The first was like a lion and had eagle wings. As I looked, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. And the mind of a man was given to it. Some translations say the heart of a man was given to it. This first beast, is Babylon. Matter of fact, the national symbol of Babylon, guarding its 2 gates, are lions with eagle wings. So it wasn't too much of a stretch for Daniel to know exactly what that was, because he walked by them every day. In the description, though, you can see that the wings are plucked off it. It's made to stand on its hind legs like a man, and it's given, whether it be the mind or the heart of a man. What do you think that's referring to? What's that? Think it's the fall? I think it sounds like something better, right? It was a beast, and now it's upright, and it has the heart or a mind of a man. Phyllis. Yeah. I read numerous commentators that stated that. I read numerous that didn't act like they knew what they were talking about, so I kind of went with that one. It to me makes sense, because what happened to Nebuchadnezzar wasn't Nebuchadnezzar's doing, was it? Nebuchadnezzar didn't humble himself and say, I think this God of the Jewish people seems logically smarter than all of these gods that we have. I think I'll start worshiping him. No, not at all. This was divine intervention, and God did it. Just like the beasts that were raised out of the sea was from God, this plucking of the wings and raising it up and giving it the heart or mind of a man, this was divinely done. Moving on to verse 5. And behold, another beast, a second one, like a bear. It was raised up on one side. It had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And it was told, arise, devour much flesh. Now, without even jumping to the interpretation of which empire this is, if there is an empire that God is describing or demonstrating in this vision as a bear, what would you think it would be like? When you think of a bear, what do you think of? What's that? I heard somebody say something. Brute strength. Very, very strong. Absolutely. Mean. Yeah. Snarly. Violent. Very violent. Yeah. Yes. That's a good one. Hungry. Not necessarily fast either, right? Bears are quick. I mean, they can get from here to there quick, but they're not going to keep getting from here to there quickly. They're not like a cheetah or a lion or an eagle, right? And all those very much fall into play, because this is talking about the Medo-Persian Empire. If you study the rise of the Medo-Persian Empire, it was a slow process. It didn't just pop up out of nowhere, quickly take over, which we're going to see with the next empire. It was kind of a slow process, but they were cruel and fierce. Now, in the verse, it also said, and it was raised up on one side. What do you think that's referring to? Yeah, one nation, the Persians, were stronger than the other. I can't picture what the bear looks like raising up on one side. But it does say like a bear, not that it is a bear. So maybe it just had a taller shoulder. I don't know. And then it also says that it had 3 ribs in its mouth. I don't know what that means. What's that? Could be 3 generals. Maybe it's 3 empires that it devoured. I mean, the Medo-Persian Empire they had defeated Egypt, Babylon. What was left was Syria. I mean, but can you really equate that with 3? I don't know. But either way, it's still a bear, and you can see it's in the middle of destroying and eating things, which is what the Medo-Persian Empire was doing. Now, remember, from Daniel's perspective, he doesn't know Darius or Cyrus yet, right? He's still serving with Babylon as the ruling empire. So this is mystery to him. We'll see in future chapters it becomes much more clear to him. But also, where else has Daniel had a vision with another empire after Babylon? Let me rephrase that. Daniel didn't have the vision, but Daniel was aware of a vision where there was another empire. Yeah, wasn't that chapter 2? Right? With Nebuchadnezzar's statue. Got the head of gold and the breast of silver. So he knows that somebody else is going to control other than Babylon. I mean, we don't have a date. He doesn't have a date in here, but he does know there's another controlling. Verse 6. After this I looked, and behold, another like a leopard with 4 wings of a bird on its back. And the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. When it comes to empires, what might a winged leopard symbolize? I'm not asking for the name of the empire, but what do you think about when you think about the characteristic of a leopard and then give it wings? Very, very fast. Cunning, okay. There you go. That's actually a really good one. Very fast, and I don't want to be ahead of it in a race because I don't want it to catch me, right? It is a leopard. They are fierce. This is referring to the Greek Empire that is coming very quickly. Yes, Bill? Oh, yeah. Okay, 4 heads, so knowledgeable. Yep. Now, of the 3 kingdoms, Babylon, Medo-Persia, and this next one, Greece, it ends up being the largest of the 3. And it does it with an insane amount of speed. Alexander the Great quickly started ruling over 1.5 million square miles. From Europe to Africa to India. He started all this at 20 years old, and by 32, they had conquered all this, and he ends up dying. And we'll see, this is spelled out even much clearer in whoever's teaching next week's chapter. This goes into more detail on that, so I won't belabor the point. But the little detail of the 4 heads, again, shows God's sovereignty in this. Because after Alexander dies, his sons don't rule. One son wasn't born until after he was dead, and the other one was killed shortly after. And his 4 generals took over and split up the kingdom amongst them. And whoever gets the joy of teaching chapter 11 is going to see how that plays out over time in immense detail. I mean, just amazing amount of detail when it comes to prophecy. But that is what that 3rd beast is referring to. It is the Greek Empire. Verse 7. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke its pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. this last beast is hard because it doesn't give us an animal-like creature to compare it to, does it? It just says the fourth beast. I mean, it does make it clear that it's a beast. It's got teeth, and it's got claws, and it's got feet, but there's nothing for Daniel even to parallel it with. It's just that much more ferocious. The question I had in your worksheet for this week was something right from the book. I'm curious what you guys put to answer this. For Daniel 7:7, it says, what two words would you use to describe the empire symbolized by the fourth beast? Again, look, they're not looking for the name of the empire, but what two words would you use after reading that description? Ferocious and cruel. It's very strong. Powerful. Okay, strong and terrifying. Angry. Yeah. Okay. So this is referring to Rome. Rome is the largest empire, larger yet than Greece. They also came to power relatively quickly, but they held on to it longer than any other empire. Matter of fact, Babylon was only the world power for 87 years. Yes, they existed before they were world power, but from Nebuchadnezzar to Cyrus was only 87 years. Very short-lived empire. The Medo-Persian Empire was only 208 years. Very short-lived empire. Again, they were an empire. They weren't an empire. They were a country. They had an army well before this, but their rise to power and conquering and controlling all, very short, 208 years. The Greeks were 304 years. So a little bit longer. They controlled more territory. Rome, 1,480 years. They ruled with iron. Now, it was many different phases. They were at their height for the first 500 years, but it was in 1453 that the remainder of the Roman Empire finally fell to the Ottoman. No world empire has ever dominated the known earth since the Roman Empire. That's kind of important to understand as we look at this, because we're quickly going to, from our perspective, not Daniel's, from our perspective, we're going to quickly switch from history to future. All of this is future to Daniel. Keep that in mind. This is all future to Daniel. But to us right now, we are getting ready to switch, coming to verse 8, from history to our future. So in verse 8 it says, I considered the horns and behold. Now, the one thing to note is it said that it had 10 horns. That's something that nothing in history about the Roman Empire can really be tied to those 10 horns or the 10 rulers. If we go back to chapter 2, to Nebuchadnezzar's statue, was the number 10 used in that also? The toes. So that 10 is important, and we're gonna look at some references in Revelation to see where that plays out. But again, this is something not in Rome past, but that is the future empire that's going to rule with the Antichrist. Daniel says, though, in verse 8, I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. So we can see here that there is definitely something different about this fourth beast compared to the other ones, right? That there's a lot more detail. And you'll see when Daniel starts asking questions here in a little bit that he's got a lot of questions about these details, as do we. Now, again, the idea behind this chapter, the purpose of this chapter is for Daniel to look and see that God is still sovereign, God is still in control. Matter of fact, if you really kind of want to summarize the purpose of this, we can look at Daniel 7, 17, and 18. It says, these great beasts which are four kings which shall arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever and ever and ever. So, from Daniel's perspective, all of this is being told to him. The world is going to have all kinds of turmoil. There's going to be rise and fall of empires. There's going to be rise and fall of rulers. There's going to be these massive things happening, but the saints are going to have the kingdom forever and ever and ever. That's really kind of the message that this vision is supposed to give to Daniel. And we're going to see in the next phase, or this next set of verses, where that really kind of plays out for Daniel. So the whole purpose of this is not to overwhelm Daniel with all these beasts that are just going to cause turmoil for mankind, and specifically the Jews, but that this is just a season. This is just part of the process. God is sovereign, and just like I promised, my kingdom will be on this earth. Now, before we start talking about the little horn, I want to ask a couple questions about these four beasts and the four kingdoms they represent, as opposed to the statue that Nebuchadnezzar's seen that also had the same four kingdoms. From Nebuchadnezzar's point of view, when the kingdoms are talked about, or when they're shown in this statue, from a human's point of view, they seem glorious, right? This large statue with this golden head and silver chest and bronze arms. It seems glorious. And then what happens to it? What breaks it? A rock from God, which is Christ, hits the feet and it crumbles. But this glorious thing is destroyed by something that just seems kind of far off, this falling rock, right? That's Nebuchadnezzar's view of that. Here we see a little bit different. From God's view, this vision Daniel has, these four kingdoms, is there anything glorious about them? No, they sound scary and ferocious and terrible, right? There's a stark difference from man's point of view of these earthly kingdoms compared to God's view of earthly kingdoms, right? We're going to see that the same thing destroys them. It is from God. It is Christ. But instead of this rock that just tumbles down, we see glory in what actually ends up defeating these and what becomes the one to actual rule. So we see that's where the glory is, not in the man or in the statue of mankind. All right, let me get back on track. I wandered there. So back to Daniel 7, the 10 horns. If you read commentaries on this throughout the ages, it's amazing how many things people try to point to for the 10 horns. I really enjoy John MacArthur's teaching. I listened to a sermon from 1980 from him on this, and I hate to say it, but he was pretty convinced it was the European Union, because there was 10 nations in it at the time. I don't think this detail of 10 kings is given to us so that we can be looking to predict when this is supposed to happen. If it was the European, let's say the 30-some nations that are in the European Union all of a sudden got down to just 10, we all need to be scared all of a sudden? No, that's a detail that, although true, really shouldn't affect how we live our life, because God's in control, right? Matter of fact, what this vision is telling us, it's actually helping us pinpoint exactly when God's kingdom will be on earth. I mean, right, just perfectly when that's going to happen. And it's really going to be when Rome takes its final form and has its final kings, and its final ruler, the Antichrist, is judged before God. That's all we really need to know, right? God wins and sets up his kingdom. We don't need to be trying to find the when. Just like with Daniel, just stay true to God. God is sovereign. You don't need to get caught up in the hysteria. And there's a lot of it around Daniel's prophecy and around Revelation. You don't need to get caught up in this hysteria of trying to look for the signs when these things are going to happen. Yes, sir, Joe? Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Because just like verse 17 says, he shall take his kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. Right? That's our hope. We don't need to be fearful. These four beasts, we do not need to be fearful. Again, that is exactly the point that this was the purpose of this for Daniel is for hope. But these 10 kings, this is not the only time this is mentioned in Scripture, just in the book of Daniel. Go to Revelation 17, verse 12. Verse 12 says, and then the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received royal power. Now remember, this is John's vision, not Daniel's vision. He's also seeing 10 horns. I've lost my spot. But they are to receive authority as kings for 1 hour together with the beast. These are of one mind, and they hand over their power and authority to the beast. They will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those with him are called the chosen and faithful. So these 10 horns that Daniel saw, we can see in Revelation that they get defeated, which is exactly what we're about ready to see as the next part of Daniel's vision. I don't have just like with the other beast, it's pretty easy to see in history exactly what these are pointing to, what those 10 horns are pointing to. That's future. I don't know, and I'm not even going to speculate. Let's move on to the good news. Daniel 7:9. As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames, its wheels were burning fire. As a stream of fire issued and came out from before him, 1,000,000 served him, and 10,000 times 10,000s stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were open. Now, the Ancient of Days is an awesome name for God, right? I think that is just neat. The Ancient of Days, with his, the fact that he is just eternal. Ancient doesn't even begin to describe him because ancient has to do with time. But from man's perspective, that is a great name for God. The scene quickly switches to a royal courtroom. Did you notice that? We went from a sea that is being stirred up by the wind and these ferocious beasts coming up to a king's courtroom. Thrones are there, his hosts are there, and he's ready to start issuing judgment. So you can see instant control by this Ancient of Days. Now, I said that Ancient of Days is a great title. Why is that an especially meaningful name in this context? Somebody had to write that down. It was in your questions. Phyllis. Yeah. Not just going to be there, always has been there. That's why in this context, that's a very fitting name. Matter of fact, we know that God had those kingdoms rise up. We'll see as we get further into Daniel's visions throughout here that every little detail of these kingdoms and their enterprise is under God's control because he knows every detail of it. If anybody's read ahead or took any time to read Daniel chapter 11, the immense amount of detail is unreal. I mean, because you can literally follow it right along with the history of that era. I mean, right down to whose brother-in-law and sister-in-law does what to whose ex-wife. I mean, it's unreal. It's like the Greek tabloids, but God was in control of it all. Just a hunger for power, but the Ancient of Days, he was there before it all, he is in charge of it all, and he is going to judge it all when it's done. And that is what Daniel is seeing right here in this vision. I was going to go to Revelation, but we better get moving. Verse 11, I looked, and then because of the sound of the great words that the horn was speaking, and as I looked, the beast was killed and its body destroyed and given over to be burned with fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. I saw in the night vision, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like a son of man, and he came to the Ancient of Days and presented himself. Now, this term, one like a son of man, you could do a whole lesson on Christ's use of that name for himself throughout all of the Gospels. But know that this is talking about Christ. It says like a son of man. So it's not a son of man, but like a son of man. Why do you think Jesus chose this title for himself and referred to himself as the Son of Man more than any other title in the gospel? And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom. Yeah. One thing I found fascinating, I was listening to one pastor as it was talking about Daniel 7 here, and he was giving some statistics of how often the second coming of Christ or the kingdom of God was referenced throughout the Bible. And it is a very, very large chunk of Christ's ministry, but it also was in prophecy. And then he gave some statistics of how often that is preached about in evangelical churches across the country, or how important it even is to most pastors. They don't focus on it. But yet it's the predominant thing that is spoken of in Scripture, because this is the accumulation of what this is all for, right? The reason Christ referred to him as the Son of Man was to reference back to, just like Phyllis said, verse 14. Because to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom that all people, nations, and languages should serve him. That is that millennial kingdom. That is what this whole course of history is working towards. And he is the one that is going to have dominion. These four ferocious beasts, these things that just seem untamable, this little horn that pops up and starts talking and bragging. I'm still creeped out by the thought of what a horn of the mouth and eyes looks like. But none of that has any power over this Son of Man at all. He is in control. Now, how does Christ's reign differ from those represented earlier in the chapter by the beasts? Forever. Case in point, right? I gave you all the dates of how long the mother empires lasted. Some of them were a very short season. Even Rome, as long as it was, and the fact that it is going to take some other form again here in the future, none of that's forever, right? Those are all temporary. But the predominant thing that's listed about Christ's kingdom is that it is forever and ever. I'll read the rest of verse 14. And to him was given dominion and glory, a kingdom that all people, nations, and language should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. So that's the other thing. The other kingdoms were also destroyed. Christ cannot be. It is the final kingdom. Now, verse 15, as for me, Daniel, my spirit within me was anxious, and the visions of my head alarmed me. I approached one of those who stood there and asked him the truth concerning all this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretations of the things. Now, I think that is kind of interesting because in the first few chapters of Daniel, what is the one kind of distinguishing feature that makes him stand out to his, I guess, to Nebuchadnezzar and his peers? What's his most distinguishing gift that he has? Interpretation of visions. Now, which again, I'm not saying that all of a sudden he lost his gift. I'm saying that all along his gift was something from God. He couldn't, even with this very vision that he had, he needed help to interpret it. So he approached the one to ask for help, and he said, these 4 great beasts are 4 kings who shall rise up out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever and ever. Verse 19 says, then I desire to know the truth about the 4th beast, which was different from all the rest, exceedingly terrifying with its teeth of iron and its claw of bronze. I find it interesting that the lion with wings, the bear with ribs hanging out of its mouth, and the cheetah with wings, he doesn't have any more questions about them, right? Actually, I got some questions about that 4th beast. He goes right to that one. And then he says, and about the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horns that came up before which 3 of them fell, the horn that had the eyes and the mouth that spoke great things and that seemed greater than its companion. As I looked, this horn made war against the saints and prevailed over them until the ancients of days came. And judgment was given for the saints of the Most High, and the time came when the saints possessed the kingdom. These are all the things that Daniel are saying that he has questions on. And time goes so fast. Trying to figure out what I'm going to skip here so I can get through everything. So let's go. Let's quickly read the angel's explanation to Daniel. Thus he said, as for the 4th beast, there shall be a 4th kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all the kingdoms, and it shall devour the whole earth, and trample it down and break it to pieces. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings shall rise, and another shall rise after them. He shall be different from the former ones, and he shall put down 3 kings. He shall speak words against the Most High, and he shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and shall think to change times and law, and they shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and a half a time. Now, because we've studied Revelation, this starts to make a little more sense as more details are given about it, right? You can see that this is the Antichrist that was spoken of. Now, I always found it interesting that John, in the book of 1 John, which was written before Revelation, said, you have all heard that Antichrist is coming, right? And we know Paul had mentioned it. Even Christ had mentioned it. But the clearest Old Testament teaching on this Antichrist is right here. This was something that everybody recognized as this evil final ruler. And it's kind of pointed out right here. And what we can see about him is that he takes control. He usurps 3 kings. He says that he speaks great things, that he's boastful. Now we know from reading in the New Testament that he actually takes over using flattery. He's just a very skilled politician. One pastor noted that it describes him in Revelation as conquering with a bow. Never mentions arrows, just a bow. Almost like just the threat of war is enough that he can take over. But the hope is given here that he only is given times and a half a time, which comes out to be 3.5 years, which is exactly the final half of the tribulation period, which means we don't have to be here. Again, there are a lot of places on the internet where people are really trying to predict these 10 horns, looking in the past, looking toward the future, trying to connect the dots. To us, the 10 horns don't matter because one's going to rise up, pluck out 3, but we're not going to be here when he is causing the turmoil that he's going to cause. Just wait for the rapture to happen. That will be the sign that all this other stuff's getting ready to happen. That's the only thing we need to be looking for. It says that he will try to change the laws and the time. What's significant about that is those are the things that God sets, right? God sets the times. God establishes law. This guy tries to place himself as God, which again, we see in Revelation. But finally, he says, but the court shall sit in judgment, and his dominion shall be taken away to be consumed and destroyed to the end. And the kingdom, the dominion, and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. Their kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom, and all dominion shall serve and obey them. So the relief in this matter is that God is in control, and the promise of his saints ruling is the future. Remember back from Daniel, he's very much waiting for Jerusalem to be established again. He wants the Jewish people to be able to not be prisoners of Babylon, to be able to go back to Jerusalem, to reestablish. They really long for the reign of David again, right? The heyday of Israel's time, David and Solomon, where they were the wealthiest, where they had the most influence and power. It really seemed like that was the peak and pinnacle of history, and it's what they longed for. What this shows is that, no, there's going to be nothing but turmoil. On and off again, from one nation to another. None of them are going to be Israel. But one like a son of man is coming, and he will have an everlasting dominion, and his saints will rule. That is, you can have peace in that. And I like to think from our perspective, right now in this time, just like with Daniel, the people in power, they change. It goes up and down. They're for us. They're against us. They persecute us. They pretend to be, it's the same thing Daniel had going on. You think all of a sudden somebody's in power and whoa, things are heading in the right direction, right? And then next thing you know, somebody's in power and, this is horrible. This makes no sense. Truth doesn't matter. This is all. Men are evil. God is sovereign. That is the end of all things. All we can do is love him, obey his commandments, and just have faith in his sovereignty. Because we know the end right here. We don't need to be fearful of the end. This judgment is not for us to fear. It can be motivating though, right? When you know that this is going to be the end, it should make you want to witness, right? It should make you want everybody to be in the kingdom of God at the end, not cast into hell. when we know that the Son of Man is the one who is going to control, we should want to introduce everybody to him. So, that's what I got for Daniel. Thank you.